All right, well, hello and welcome everyone. This is the second session of our webinar. Dr. Omar Murad will be moderating this session, so I'll hand it over to him.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everybody. So the last time, this is like Rasul said, this is our second session. The last time we talked about the more direct pathway through prelim or research, and then going directly into a categorical residency. Today, we're going to be talking about the more indirect pathway of transferring credits or even going through a fellowship after completing residency and that pathway as well. So I think we'll start the same way we did the last time. So you can, we'll start with somebody, they'll go through in their own words, their journey, where they went to med school, research, and how they started working in the US. And then if people have similar stories, they can kind of just say that it was similar with regard to 1, 2, 3. And these are the differences. That way we don't have to repeat ourselves too much. We'll have time in the end for questions from any of the participants, which we'll do through the chat. Other than that, I guess I'll be asking the questions. I'm sure if it was pretty casual the last time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt from the group. So I think we'll get started with Rasul. So can you tell us about your path and how you ended up in the States?
Yeah, thanks, Omar. So I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. So I attended Georgia University of Science and Technology, graduated in 2011, one-year internship in Jordan, followed by residency in Qatar, which is an ACGME I accredited, I being international. And that actually played in a little bit later. After finishing, I did a colorectal mentorship for about a year. And then I applied and went to Harvard BIDMC in Boston, where I did a bariatric advanced GI, robotic fellowship. Immediately after that fellowship, I was given the option for an institutional license, but I passed on it. And I'm sure we'll talk about that option down the line. Other people went down that pathway. But then I actually ended up popping into residency. And the way that I did it was because I went to a different hospital for my residency, was 6 months observership as a PGY3, where functionally I worked as a 4, and then 6 months as a PGY4, and then 1 year as a PGY5. Those were my 2 years of residency because they had petitioned the American Board of Surgery to give me credit for years served previously. Immediately after that.
Sorry, Rasul, I'm going to interrupt already.
Okay.
I just want to, just because I was actually unfamiliar with this, and I'm sure most people are unfamiliar with this, the standard accepted rule that most people know is that if you want to be licensed in the States, you have to do a full residency in the States. That's kind of the basic standard rule. So I just want to point out that this is why all these pathways are very unique, and that's why a lot of them will be talking about license and the institution petitions, because that's the only way to do it. It's a unique circumstance to be able to get licensed without doing a full residency in the States.
Yeah, I can actually elaborate a little bit on that. So it's very important to distinguish. There's a difference between getting the American Board of Surgery and being licensed, as you mentioned. As international medical graduates, to be licensed in the States, a typical unrestricted license, you generally need to do 2 or 3 years of residency training. And that's all you need to become licensed. So we sometimes see third-year surgical residents who have a full license, even though they haven't even finished residency yet. That's one. For the American Board of Surgery, to get your actual board certification, the pathway is a little different. You can either do the full 5 years, or you can, if you've done any number of years, 1 through 4 years overseas, you can get 1 year in credit. If you've done all 5 years and you're board certified, you can get 2 years of credit. And then in some exceptional cases, they'll actually petition the board, say, this person we've observed for 6 months, we think they're up to the standard, we'd like to give them 3 years credits. And that's kind of what happened with me, and we'll see with Abutaka as well. But yeah, that's kind of the difference between licensing and board. And it's important to know if you want to work on both pathways or just one. Some people have no use for the American board, and we'll probably hear about that today as well. But yeah, so finished my 2 years of residency, got my American Board of Surgery, my license, followed up with a fellowship in malignant and benign foregut surgery and surgical endoscopy. And then I had my license, I had my board, and I worked as a bariatric and foregut surgeon in the US. So that was my pathway.
When you were in med school, you weren't necessarily planning on going to the States, right?
No, no, no,
So
no.
you didn't really have any kind of preparation or anything like that at that point.
No,
It wasn't
I did not.
until Qatar.
Yeah, I pretty much had Qatar in mind. And so I didn't do any research. Truthfully, by the time I had kind of moved to the States, I did not do much research. My pathway was always I kind of wanted to come back to Jordan. So I was thinking do Qatar, go back to Jordan, but then the opportunity presented itself. Also, uniquely enough, I've never applied for a match. I've never gone through the match system. Most of my things were cold call emails. For my first fellowship, I literally just sent one email.
So
And
the
then
biggest jump you had was going from Qatar to Beth Israel.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
So, that was actually interesting. So I was actually pushed by one of the chairs of surgery who said, why don't you go to the States, do something, come back. So I just jumped on the internet. I found a job posting. I was not going to actually apply because it was Harvard and whatnot. And that's why I always say you lose 100% of the chances you don't take. And someone told me that at that time. So I sent an email. 6 hours later, they said, come down for an interview. Did the interview after 2 days, got the job on the spot. And the same thing happened.
For a bariatric foregut fellowship.
Bariatric, hernia, robotics. Yeah. The foregut came
advanced abdominal wall reconstruction kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it was happenstance. But and I can talk about this down the line, but there were, I think, certain things that set me up for success to where they were like, come for an interview and you have the job. And we can talk about that now or down the line, as you guys wish.
I think let's go through everybody and then we'll talk about any questions. I think Dr. Abutaka had a similar pathway to yours. Can you tell us kind of from your words about your pathway, any differences?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. So I kind of similar to Rasul, just a little bit of differences. So we went to the same university, Jordan University of Science and Technology. That was in 2011, right? And then I moved to Qatar for residency. I did general surgery residency. I stayed there after residency. I did 3 years, give or take, of acute care surgery fellowship, which is emergency general surgery without trauma, without critical care. During my last year in the fellowship in Qatar, I applied for a fellowship here in the US. So I applied for a surgical critical care fellowship. I came, I matched the University of Minnesota. So I came here, and from the start of my fellowship, I approached people that I want to do part of my residency again. So to be able to sit for the board, you need to do PGY4, PGY5 in the state, given that the American Board of Surgery will give you 3 years credit for whatever training you've done in the past. So, and that has to be done through the program that is offering you a PGY4 spot. So the University of Minnesota had a spot and they applied for me. and I got 3 years of credit from the American Board of Surgery. So I started PGY4 right after my surgically critical care year, fellowship year. I finished PGY4 and now started my PGY5 year. And that's it. It's going to be one more year done with training, hopefully.
Mabruk.
Allah yabarak feek.
Same question, actually. So how did you go from Qatar to Minnesota?
So mine was more straightforward because I applied for a match. So I applied for the surgical critical care match. To be honest, like coming from Qatar and having another fellowship, acute care surgery, I got lots of interviews, and that's also the experience of other residents and fellows who followed me. So I interviewed like in 12 or 13 places, and through the match, I matched in University of Minnesota. The transition is a little bit difficult at first. It's a different system. Qatar has a very robust healthcare system, but still not as like the culture and everything, and how things are done in the US is a little bit different. But during my critical care year, the important thing is to be honest, that's what I tell for everyone who comes here. Probably every day is a job interview day. You give your best, you approach people, you try to see what are the available options. You would aim to get a PGY4 position in our situation, finishing residency and fellowship. But if you have a chance to go as a PGY3, that's also a very good option because the American board, my understanding is they give 2 years credit quite commonly to people who finished training before. Giving 3 years of credit is pretty much harder. And you have to have case logs, you have to have all these things which we had in Qatar. That's one of the advantages, that we have ADS logs. So basically they transferred my logs from Qatar to the US, and the board has access to them, and they saw everything.
Yeah.
I know, Rasul, you're a US citizen, right?
Yeah, I am.
Ahmed, did you have visa issues, or are you?
No, I'm green card holder as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
It definitely played a role though. Because I remember like one of the big things even when I went to Boston was one of the first questions was, do you need a visa? It might delay your application if you need a visa, and that wasn't an issue. I wanted to piggyback off of what Abutaka said. That was also a big selling point that I said I'd like to get to later. When I went to Boston, in my email, the first email I sent, I actually attached my ADS logbook. And they were like, "Oh, you've done everything the same as here." And then when I went into residence, sorry, I'm gonna have to mute someone. And then when I went into residency, they actually plugged my name into the system and it pulled out my logbook. So I was done with all the case requirements from day one. I'm sure Ahmed had a similar experience.
That
of course, it keeps adding, but yeah, sorry.
So I was going to say the year of fellowship is basically similar to a prelim year because there's no obligation for them to give you a job. There's no obligation for anything. Once you're done, if they're not interested, that's it. So
right.
It's exactly the same where every day is an interview. Did that PGY4 spot open up while you were a fellow?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's different from an institution to another. University of Minnesota has like a 7-year general surgery program because residents after the 3rd year they go into 2 years of research. Some of them extend that to 3rd year. Some of them do a 1 year or a fellowship instead, something like that.
So they start having gaps.
Exactly. So in certain years, you would have a position. Some years you don't, or they don't. So if you're in the right time, the right place, probably you'll get a chance.
Yeah.
And when you applied through the match, you used letters of recommendation from Qatar, or
Right. Yeah. So it's pretty basic. They need basically a letter from the program director, your most recent program director. Like if you're in fellowship, you get it from him or her. If you're in residency, you get it from them.
You never
and two
did any
other
electives
faculty.
or anything like that in the States before Minnesota.
Not in medical school, nothing.
So Jordan,
My first
Qatar, and then Minnesota.
boom, right
Okay.
away. I
All
did
right.
my elective in medical school. I did it in Germany, actually. But before that, I didn't come to the US for any clinical experience.
That's pretty, that's good. I mean, that's to go to be
Yeah.
able to penetrate, straight into fellowship and residencies,
Yeah.
especially.
And I'm also going to add that has also been the experience of a lot of people coming from Hamad. I know more than, at this point, I think it's like 6 or 7 of us who were able to go from Hamad straight to the US. I also zero clinical experience in the US. I actually did my 2-month elective bil Medina al-Tibbiya. So I just stayed in Jordan. I didn't even go to Germany.
Wow. All right. I think we'll move on to Yazan Adwan. He has also did his residency in Jordan, from my understanding, but had a different fellowship in the US.
الله يعطيك العافية يا شباب. سامعيني كويس؟
سامعك.
So thank you very much for having us to share our great experiences and stories. So I finished my medical school from just 2010 internship in MOH for a year. Then my residency in King of and I finished that in 2016. My general surgery residency in Jordan. I joined Doctors Without Borders as a general surgeon for about a year and a half, بالرمثة. Then after that, I joined Hashimi University as an assistant professor for scholarships. I applied to the transplant surgery match in 2017-18 for the cycle starting 2019. I got matched at the Ohio State University. I did the 2 years of fellowship, abdominal transplant fellowship, and I stayed for a 3rd year doing an advanced liver transplant fellowship at OSU. I think the transplant is one of the, I will say, toughest pathway to find a job. The job market is not an easy market for jobs for physicians. Ashraf also knows that. I applied for many jobs here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go back a little bit for the fellowship interviews. I applied for the transplant fellowship. I did all my recommendation letters from Jordan, from all the places that I worked with, and at that time it was, I think, a little bit easier to get a transplant job in the US if you compare pre to post COVID era. And especially the interviews back then, they were on site. They were like nothing called like Zoom or virtual interviews back then. So I have 12 interviews at that time. I came 3 times to the US. It cost me a lot of money, a lot of time and effort, and a lot of vacations to spend away from home and from family and from the jobs that I got in Jordan. But alhamdulillah, I got matched at Ohio State University, one of the top 10 transplant programs in the globe. And it was a tough pathway. It was a tough training. Transplant surgery is one of the toughest training ever, especially in the US. And a 3rd year in advanced liver transplant. That this year, it's out of the curriculum for transplant. It's another fellowship. So it was another year, not 2. Basically, just to be frank with you guys, transparently, it buys you time to apply for jobs. And in transplant per se, it's really important to stay in the field because the job market is tough.
When you say jobs, you're talking about to work as an attending or for fellowship?
As an attending. Even as a fellowship, for fellowship acceptance, after COVID, Before COVID, about 17% of the fellows candidates were US grads, while the rest were IMGs. And after COVID, now it's the opposite. It's the opposite because most of the interviews now are virtually. So you can do 20 interviews in the same day from your bedroom. You don't have to travel, you don't have to spend money, you don't have to take PTOs or days off. So Americans now, they are, even I asked a lot of Americans, Native Americans, why you're applying for transplant, even if you don't think about getting to the fellowship. He said, one of them told me frankly, it's just like a training. I'm training myself to do interviews, just meeting people. For example, this is one of the unique stories.
So how can you, if you just do a fellowship, you didn't do any residency?
I did not do any residency. I had 2 months elective course back in 2009, 2010 in a different specialty. It was in neurosurgery in University of Illinois at Chicago, UIC. And that's all my US clinical experience. No research years. Alhamdulillah, I was lucky. I was trained well. كله دعم من الله ودعوات الوالدين. I applied for many jobs. I got interviewed in a few of them and listed a few in on-site as a final candidates for transplant attending jobs. And it's all about connections. It's all about meeting people. It's all about working hard, improving yourself, and it depends on your team.
And there wasn't a problem getting the license, just with the fellowship, to get the license?
So I was on J1 visa. And speaking about this, if the time goes back, I will change my rankings for the fellowships, because after staying here for a couple of years, after struggling every year with J1 visa, my advice to all people here, IMGs, especially from Jordan and Middle East, try to avoid J1 visa. You're not only chasing a residency or a fellowship program, you're chasing I'll say job after that. And that's what really matters. It does matter where you're doing your residency or your fellowship, but if you want to stay in the US, you have to look 2 steps ahead. J1, it's a life-changing visa. أنا بسميها بصمة عام. J1 visa.
I agree. I was on the J1 and I think I got lucky because I did my, where I ended up doing my waiver. I was very happy. But other than that, I was a prisoner, very limited opportunities.
Yeah, just doing math. If I have an H1B visa or green card or citizenship, my chances will be at least tripled or quadrupled, even applying for a fellowship or applying for the jobs or for the job market. Alhamdulillah, I got lucky. I started last year with the University of Virginia here in Charlottesville, Virginia, as an attending, full job attending. I do kidney, pancreas, liver transplants, as well as vascular access cases. هلا شغالين على موضوع hopefully increasing the concept of brain donation in Jordan. I know Ashraf, also another great group of physicians in the US, in Jordan, and even in Europe. That's basically my short life story. Bumpy road, but I will say, alhamdulillah.
Oh, thanks for sharing. I think we'll go to Dr. Ashraf, who I think did 2 transplant fellowships. Is that?
Yeah. أول شيء الله يعطيكم العافية وشكرا على استضافتنا. أنا طريقي تشبه طريق جدا كثير. أنا خلصت طب من جامعة التكنولوجيا وكملت إقامة بجامعة العلوم والتكنولوجيا. خلال سنة الامتياز برضو وزارة الصحة بربد عملت امتحانات أمريكا وحاولت أعمل ماث بأول سنة أو سنتين بعد الميديكال سكول. كان هدفي إني أطلع أمريكا، أهم من شو أنا بدي تخصص، بس ما زبطت معي أول سنة. فبعدين قلت ما دامها مش ضابطه خليني اعمل شيء انا بحبه، فعملت الجراحه بمستشفى الملك عبد الله. وبعدين باخر السنه عملت مقابلات للترانسبلانت. كان الترانسبلانت والتروما هم التخصصين الوحيدين اللي اخذت فيهم انترفيوز. صراحه طلع لي 3 ترانسبلانت انترفيوز وواحده تروما. فا I met the University of Miami. كان big program so busy. ما حدا بده يروح يعني، كان استعباد يعني. فأنا بالنسبة لي ما كان يفرق، كان طموحي إني بدي أطلع. فطلعت 2 صراحة يعني كأنك بالعسكر يعني، كأنك بالجيش، شغل وتعب وهاي، بس استفدت منهم كثير. وبعدين بعد 2 كنت خلص almost done وما عندي شيء أعمله، بدي أرجع على الأردن. بعدين لقيت قبل ما أسافر بأسبوعين طلع لي يعني لقيت أوبشن إنه أروح أعمل سنة ثالثة بأوهايو ستيت. كان second year fellow dropped off the fellowship, they need somebody to fill the position فأخذته. بهاي السنة يعني I proved myself to them, I work hard, and the chief of transplant at that time there was really happy with me, and they were in the process of hiring and attending, but he again changed his mind and went somewhere else. So they needed somebody on the spot. فأخذني يعني أخذني أعطاني الجوب أوفر. أنا مولود بأمريكا فمعي جنسية أمريكية، فالفيزا ما كانت مشكلة. البورد الأمريكي كان عندهم مشكلة، ما كان عندهم حدا معينينه من غير بورد. فآخر فترة إلي بالآخر سنة بالفيلوشيب they changed some of the bylaws of the hospital to add you requirements as American Board of Surgery or any foreign equivalent. هاي فتحت صراحة طريق بعدين لزملاء كثير، وضليت اشتغلت بأوهايو ستيت حوالي 7 سنين. وبعدين خلص I own my destiny وغيرت، نزلت على فلوريدا better position better environment better paycheck.
فكمان نفس الشيء، ما عملت أي ريزيدنسي بأمريكا؟
ولا residency ولا observership ولا research experience, just very strong clinical training. Field that is not well let's say ما فيش عليه إقبال كبير من الأمريكان.
طيب بعدين لما بدك تروح على شغل تاني مثلا وهم ما بيعرفوك إنه اشتغلت معهم من قبل، زي ما لما كنت تعمل فellowship معاهم، بيسألوا عن الريزيدنسي وهالاشياء، ولا لانه صار عندك خبرة 7 سنين خلاص بطل في نقاش؟
لما غيرت الشغل كانوا يعني بناء على خلينا نقول الاكسبيرينس والهيستوري والهاي، يعني I was almost kind of recruited for a new position. فيعني كان it was so simple so easy. اللايسنس عشان اللايسنس كمان يعني الفيلوشيب بميامي 2 it's not ACGME accredited, but there is no ACGME accreditation for transplant. فاعتبروهم they consider them to do the license. So I was able to apply for an Ohio medical license during my 3rd year of fellowship. هون بأمريكا إذا عندك اللايسنس الانستتيوشن if you're an institution they can waive anything. If they want you they can do anything. بس هي اللايسنس، حتى اللايسنس يعني زملائي لي حتى اخذوا من غير ما يعملوا تدريب هون. اللايسنس if you have a good lawyer and if you have an institution behind you بيعملوا لك في multiple things. في institutional license conditional license بتقدر تشتغل يعني، وبعد 2 بتفتح.
المهم بس تحط رجلك بالباب يعني كالعادة.
بدك حدا يكون بده اياك، هذا هو يعني. بدك institution او بدك حدا يعني they are willing to help.
بس انه بس تبلش الفellowship وتدخل امريكا خلص يعني اذا اشتغلت
والله
هيك.
مش شرط يعني، مش شرط. بدك يعني انا كنت بالمكان المناسب بالوقت المناسب.
طبعا
يعني فيها حظ يعني، فيها
طبعا.
لا التعب لابد منه، اذا ما بتتعب ما ولا
زينا
حظ
كلنا
ولا شيء.
اكيد في حظ اكيد.
بدك تكون يعني ضامن انك انت تعبان كثير ومشتغل كثير وعندك كل ويجيك ضربة الحظ برضه معها
فرصة. طيب شكرا.
العفو.
وفاينلي عندنا الدكتور أمجد.
Could I just interject for one quick second? Just kind of talking about the licenses, just because I see somebody also had asked me about this. One important distinction to note is you have the way of, as Dr. Ashraf said, you do your 2 or 3 years of ACGME training, and then you get the license. But then I'm sure all of you saw the Tennessee law, and everyone's talking about this new Tennessee law. It's actually old. In one form or another, it's available in all of America. And it goes by different names: institutional license, license by endorsement, faculty license. And generally, just as Dr. Ashraf was saying, if there's an institute that is backing you up, you will get one of these licenses, and then you can work. I hope that kind of summarized it. Well, if I mess anything up, please let me know.
دكتور أمجد.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hello.
Can you see me?
We can see you, we can hear
I was
you.
having issues with the camera. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about my experience. أنا أمجد القباني. I graduated from University of Jordan for Science and Technology, 2011. During medical school, actually, one of the inspiration that we had was having doctors from the States visiting us at the medical school. So you see people, you get inspired by them. During my medical school as well, I did 2 months of elective at Texas Heart Institute in Houston, cardiovascular surgery. I got exposed to the American system by then. And I did my CS at that time. I believe it's canceled now. So my eyes were like in the US. I wanted to do the residency in the US, but unfortunately, like towards the end of my medical school, my dad passed away. So like plans got delayed. So I went like for 2 years. I did like a residency in Saudi Arabia at a military hospital, and it was like a service country residency initially. Then I got accepted as the only general surgery resident who was non-Saudi in the Western region. But I wanted to go to Qatar as well. I had like lots of friends. Rasul was there. Abutaka were there. We were all the same batch, by the way, at medical school. So from Saudi Arabia, I moved to Qatar. I did the ACGME accredited residency program. I'm not going to talk a lot about that since Rasul and Taq already touched base with that. But during the residency as well, I did like 2 months of vascular surgery elective during my residency in California. I tried at that time to go to PGY3 position, but they didn't sponsor visa. So again, like visa is an issue always. After I finished, I did the 3 years of acute care surgery fellowship in Hamad, just like Abutaka. After that, I applied for the surgical critical care fellowship. As the interviews were virtual, I got plenty of them. I chose to go to a place where I knew they would take some residents like afterwards, which is Allegheny General Hospital. I did my year. Initially coming, there were like lots of challenges. A person is coming from different system, from a foreign country. I had some changes initially. So and again, like as mentioned earlier, if you're not this is the right place, the right spot, and they have an opening that can take you. So initially there was no opening for me. So I tried to look online. I went to job fairs. I emailed lots of people looking for job opportunities, and I got 2 job interviews. So one thing to mention, whenever you look for those like job interviews, they always say like BE, which is board eligible, or BC, which is board certified. So that's the first checklist that you need to meet. The second part was whether they sponsor visa or not. And most of them, they don't do that. So there are like 2 changes that you might face. After I did the interviews, actually, luckily, I was offered a job in upstate New York, University of Columbia affiliated hospital as a trauma medical director. at a level 3 trauma center. After that, I got the opportunity to stay in the same hospital for another fellowship, or there was a residency spot as well. But I was like already, I signed the job as well. Like already, I signed the job. So just like to summarize the thing, to be honest, I don't believe in luck. It's all like about hard working. You should like keep your aim, follow your passion. ما توفيق الله دعاء الوالدين. Opportunities will come to you. So yeah, regarding the license now, I just want to share with you guys some stuff, as I believe most of people here are people who finish residency and like they want to have a chance to come to the States. There are certain states where you can get the license without being board certified or board eligible. Let me just share my screen.
Let me ask you something. When you went from Qatar to, you went to Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, that's right.
They sponsored you for an H-1B. There was no issue about J-1 or anything. You just went straight to H-1B. What was that like?
As I think who mentioned it, it was a J1 or jail visa, as Dr. Someone mentioned in the comments. So it was J1 visa actually.
Okay, so you're on a J-1 visa now.
That's correct. Yes, I'm in the process of the waiver now. The attorney, the hospital are working on my waiver visa. So there are certain states where you can have the license actually, and like as people mentioned earlier, it's two different things: being licensed or being board eligible. So you can have the license, like for example in New York. In New York, if you have 3 years of residency in the States or an accredited training, you can get the license. And if you're like a foreign grad, then like every 2 years is equivalent to 1 year. So 3 years for Americans, and for us it's going to be like 6 years. So if you have like 6 years of training, you can get the training even if you don't step in the States. I know people who just mail their documents and they get the license. So
Benny, do you mind if
for New York, I know for sure.
I just
Yeah,
want to
sure.
interrupt one thing just to make the distinction. What Dr. Qabbani is saying here is that typically you need as an FMG 3 years of training in the States. However, if you do double the amount, 6 years outside, so in Hamad in Jordan, it's equivalent. So he's saying that
That's
they
correct.
have an equivalency thing. I just wanted to make that clear so they didn't think as an FMG you need 6 years wherever you are. But this is very nice.
Absolutely. It's 3 years if you are American grads and double that if you are outside. So Arizona, you can get it as well. In Minnesota, I believe they need 1 year, maybe Abutaka can correct me, like of American training, then you can get it. Illinois can give that. There are certain institutes where they recognize ACGMEI, like Iowa, Wisconsin. I believe institutes in Jordan are some of them like they started to be ACGMEI accredited. Maybe Just is one of them, I think now. Correct me if I'm mistaken. So that's one arm where you can apply for certain states where you can get the license, because it's important after you finish your fellowship, if you don't choose to go to the residency pathway, it's important to find a place where gonna give you you can get the license, because nobody's gonna offer you a job if you can't get the license. The other part now, like at the end, of course, you don't like to be like restricted. You don't want to be restricted. You want to have the freedom to move from one state to another, and you can't get that if you don't have the board, obviously. Now there's an alternative pathway for the board. I'm sharing the screen. Can you see the academic pathway? Is it clear?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, perfect. So there's like for the American Board of Surgery, there's academic pathway to be board certified in the US, where you'll sit for the exam and you can get your American Board of Surgery. So the total number of years, you should have like 7 years of full unrestricted medical license in the States. And you can start that actually before you come in the States. Like going backward now, I wish I did that before I came to the States if I knew it. The other thing, you need to stay in of those 7 years, you need to stay 5 years in a place in academic position, and this place should have a residency program, and you'll be like a faculty for that program. Then they need like a minimum 1 year of clinical postgrad accredited training, whether it's like ACGME or it can be even like a certain society. Like there are certain fellowships that are not ACME accredited, but they are accredited for other societies. So this also counts. I mentioned the 5 years as well. After that, there are like other requirements, like you need a letter from the chair, you need a letter from the CMO, the program director of general surgery as well, and you need like to have some work to do like in education or research, and obviously the CV as well. Then you apply to the board. There's a meeting. After that, like the phase 2, once you are accepted, you can sit for an exam, which is not the American Board of Surgery exam. It's like an initial exam you take. If you pass that, you can sit for the American Board of Surgery exam. So overall, it takes 7 years to achieve the American Board of Surgery with this pathway. But during that period, you'll be working as an attending. I believe like I think the first people to sit for this exam is going to be like this year or the year after that. I know some people who are like preparing for the exam as of now. So I'll stop sharing. I can
Thanks for
send you
doing
the,
that.
the link.
Actually, I had no idea about any of this.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, I think you answered everything I wanted to ask. Any other questions from the group?
Just a quick
go for
sorry,
it.
a quick comment about Minnesota. So they license you after 1 year of US training. I tried applying once I came here on my training in Qatar, and they didn't accept that. They put in their website that they have a monthly meeting to discuss foreign credit, but it didn't work. So I waited till I finished my surgical critical care year, and right away they give it. So 1 year of US training, and you get the license, I think in 3 or 5 states.
Yeah. Okay.
I actually like there's like one area I didn't dig deep into it. Maybe you guys have an answer for that. So after you have a license in certain states, I think you can apply for other states as well, like after a certain period of time. Is that accurate?
Yeah, you're 100% accurate. It's called a license through reciprocity. There are approximately 9 to 11 states that offer it. And we can get to that now. I was thinking of doing the group general Q&A and then jumping over to the audience's questions and answers section, and then we could do a quick recap, because I do feel this topic specifically needs a recap, just to kind of outline everything if people are on board with that. Again, this is a very informal saying, so unless if I hear any objections, we'll move forward with that proposal. Okay, very well. So in terms of, sorry, 1 second here, the general group Q&A, we have it kind of broken up into 2 groups. So in group number 1, we have myself and Abutaka, and the question is pretty much straightforward. I'll be speaking with you, Abutaka, because Omar did say he may need to step away. He's actually on call. So thank you very much for doing this, Omar. But the question was, what do you think worked well for you in terms of your pathway? What were the pros, the cons? What do you think set yourself up for success?
That's an important question. Thanks for whoever asked it. So the first thing that would set you up for success is the cumulative experience you had before you come to the US. It might sound simple that yeah, we came from Qatar to US for a fellowship and then you ended up in a residency program. But believe me, like during even residency in Qatar, you have to put effort in research. You have to put effort in your teaching portfolio, like how much you teach residents, how much you teach students, how much you're involved in these things. I had probably two video presentations in the American College of Surgeons during my residency in Qatar. So you have to do the things that people do here in the US. So at least you have a comparable CV in terms of research experiences and teaching experience and so on and so forth. So this also will get you the I would say how people or how surgeons in US in the meetings and in general forums communicate, and you would have a chance to network with them. So plan that like beforehand. Be deliberate about how much effort you put in these things before you apply for a fellowship. Because even when you apply for fellowship, this will set you apart from other IMGs who apply for the fellowship, the same spot. And then during the fellowship, you will see how all these things fall into place in terms of how involved you are in education, how you're involved in research, how you're involved in quality improvement, which is also a good part of your work here as a resident, as a physician in general. Is this the first part of the question? Is there another part of the question?
No, I agree 100%, and I actually echo that sentiment. We worked on a lot of these things together. So we were educational, administrative chief residents. We built our research portfolios. We did the research symposiums as well in Qatar where we hosted them. We took the app sites. I feel like that was a big part of it, having good app site scores. And yeah, it was really building out your CV and doing what people in the States do. And the residency was unforgiving. I can talk about that for myself. I remember intern year doing 120 plus hours on average. But you had that ACGMEI stamp on it. And while it's not equivalent to ACGME, I do feel it helped a lot. I cannot stress how much I felt that helped. So that worked really well. The next step is, how did you like your pathway overall? Did you enjoy your pathway? What particularly do you think helped? And I can talk about myself, for example, and I don't know if you'll agree with this. I think you will. Having done residency, then fellowship, then back in as a chief resident, the autonomy I was given was tremendous. I wasn't operating like a trainee, so I already knew how to do the procedure. They were giving me full autonomy in complex procedures. And it was really the equivalent of what they call transition into practice, where you're like a junior attending, doing what you need to do. And, especially in transplant, I know I see he isn't shaking his head, yes. Especially in transplant, it's the exact same thing. You walk in, day one, they're like, all right, go, and they'll leave. They'll come back after the fact. In my fellowship, from day one, the program director was like, all right, call me when you're done with the dissection. And he would come have a look and be like, all right, do your repair and leave and come back. So that level of autonomy we were given, because we weren't there nitpicking how to hold the instruments. I felt that really gave us a boost in our training, if that makes sense. So yeah, Abutaka, how did you feel kind of taking that one step back for those extra 2 years?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so my experience went into two phases, I would say. I came to surgical critical care fellowship, which is very heavy surgical ICU stuff. We had ECMO program as well, so things I didn't deal with it before. I enjoyed that a lot. You enjoy learning new things. You have very good and great faculty actually supporting you. You will learn these a lot, and you will be basically in charge. You get as much as you need, as much as you want from your fellowship and training. And then when I transitioned to residency again, as Rasul said, I'm not an intern, so I am the senior of the service, or now a chief resident. So you're expected to do the procedures. You are given lots of autonomy in the OR. I don't want to do an intern year again, of course. Seeing especially the interns here in the US, it's really a tough job. So doing that and experiencing that is really rewarding. And yeah, I have no regrets about it. I love it. Well, it's all tawfiq min Allah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there was a term being thrown around between luck, and then Qabbani said there is no luck. You know, the way I kind of always think about it is, you know, luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. So
Exactly.
you're there, you're prepared, you're ready, you've built up and boost your CV, and then you're just waiting for something to open up. So it's not just pure luck. Yeah, I see a thumbs up from Qabbani as well. But yeah, you know, to me, I loved my pathway. Sure, it took an extra 2-3 years. I wouldn't do it any differently. I mean, even towards the end, I had like the attending saying, "Oh, you're on service. We're gonna put these extra hard cases," and I'm like, "You have completely misread me. You've misunderstood me. Thank you for the hard cases, but I'd much rather do something nice and fun." But there we go. I will open up the same questions to the second group, Yazan and Qabbani. The first set was, you know, what were the pros, what were the cons of your pathway?
Good. Yazan, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Cons and pros. As I said before, I mean, when I applied, it was pre-COVID. I'll say the easiest time of the decade. I think the pros of transplant, it was one of transplant, maybe MIS. I think they were the top, or I will say the shortest, but not the easiest, but the shortest pathway for IMG trained general surgery or general surgery or non-boarded Americans, I will say, to seek fellowships in the country. Now it's a little bit difficult. It's harder. It's more competitive. A lot of Americans, they are competing us, and they are taking all these spots. I mean, there's no too many fellowship spots, neither attending job market spots. I think one of the most important things is the visa. It's really one of the top, you know, points on your resume. It equals research, it equals training, because, you know, a lot of people, they just reply to you, "Oh, are you a citizen? Green card, visa?" No, thank you, without even looking at your CV. I basically and honestly think that IMGs, I'm talking about myself, and a lot of people maybe here or there, they share the same criteria as I do. IMG and not American board, I think we are ranked number 2 or number 3, you know, roughly, when we are applying for residency, when we are applying for fellowship or jobs. You know, being a citizen and American boarded, then being a citizen non-American boarded, then having none of these. I mean, let's be honest. Especially, this is my piece of advice. This is my message to the young, I would say, group of people here. I mean, the 5-6 of us, I think we stood our feet here. I think we are a little bit more established and we made it. So I think the whole purpose of sharing our stories is to pass the torch to the next generation. The people, they are looking how to stand here. I mean, a lot of people, I'm reading all the chat, I'm reading all the comments either here or in Jaffa or all the places, there are either still 50-year, 60-year medical students and just JU or in Jordan, generally speaking, or doing research years here or prelim. So these are the people who will gain the most of these kind of chatting and conversations. So I think I don't believe in luck, just like Abani said and you said. It's where your preparation meets your opportunity. You have to be well prepared. You have to work your ass. I'm sorry to say this, but you have to work. You have to work. You have to work. I mean, we don't have a research background as a U.S. medical students. None of us were graduated with a ton of research from Jordanian universities. So you have to build your resume. You have to build your behavior, your character. It's a different mentality, different life, different experience here. You have to prove yourself in a good way. And you have to wait until you meet your opportunity. It might be here in the country. It might be back in Qatar. It might be back in Saudi or Jordan. It doesn't mean that you're not lucky. It means that your opportunity is to be there. Allah katib lak ya tروح هناك. That's it. And alhamdulillah, my chance was here, or I got the opportunity here in the US. But where I'm going to stay 5-10 years from now, maybe going back to Jordan, maybe to the Gulf countries, I don't know. So that's our opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually said it really well. At one point you said, 10, 11 years, and I can already, I know the answers from some of these people, but I will say I was in surgical training for 11 years. I was at one point PGY 11. Qabbani, Abutaka, do you care to share your PGY number?
Yeah, just like you. So yeah, 2011 we finished,
12.
and now I'm starting my attending job like coming months actually.
Yeah. So
PGY
Qabbani
12 here.
right there. Hey, Abutaka is saying PGY 12. So none of these were, a quick jump. Essentially, you waited out. You had to go through the motions.
I got to just 2004. I got my first job as an attending 2022, 18 years.
Yep. And a lot of people, there's a mentality, especially in Jordan. I even had this mentality. ما بدنا نضوع ولا سنة. ما بدي ولا سنة تضيع علي. And I think I even told it to Qabbani right before I left to the States. I was like, لا ما بدي أضوع وقت. بدي أبلش attending وخلص. It's not wasted time. Like I said before, going back into the residency, I was enjoying it. I loved residency. My PGY 4 and 5 year in the States was the best time of my life. Trained well, had a good time. So it's never time wasted.
I don't want to underestimate our people, but if you are, I was one of these people. I don't want to waste any more years. I already wasted 3 years after Gen Surg to get to my fellowship in Jordan. I worked in Jordan 3 years, but anyhow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in your life is nothing. If you want to say, I don't want to waste any year, with all respect to all of us, we share the same plate here, okay? We share the same boat. We are already behind American people because they have more research experience. They have, in their criteria, they have better resume. Being volunteered for 5-6 years during the school, high school, and medical field, we are already behind in their perspective. So you cannot say, "Oh, I don't want to waste any more years. I don't want to waste any part of my life." If you're saying these things, if you are implanting these ideas in your mind, you'll be left behind.
Yeah.
بعدين بامريكا اذا بتحب تقارن بامريكا يعني بتطلع على الخريجين الامريكان كلهم PGY 10 11 12 عندهم بعدين الكل 8 سنين. فيعني انا لما بلشت اتندنج صراحه من اللي بلش معي نفس السنه بالانستتيوشن انا كنت جزء اصغر واحد فيهم مع اني انا PGY 10 or 11. فيعني انت رايح على سيستم هيك المتوقع فيه يعني.
Yeah.
Even me. Actually, Rasul, we have Melody, who's like the general surgery coordinator.
Yeah.
She's like 32-year-old. She just joined medical school.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, you stop counting years. Rani made a very good point at the very bottom, and we'll get back to it to circle around. But if that's it for that, would we like to open up the Q&A to the audience? We have a few questions.
أضيف لك آخر شيء، أكثر سنة تعلمت فيها واستفدت فيها هي السنة الثالثة الفيلوشيب اللي هي أصلا يعني مش موجودة يعني.
The super fellow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every additional year is you just build because you're more mature as a surgeon. You know what's going on, and now you actually start asking the important questions. Not how do I cut here, but why am I cutting here?
Yeah.
And it just reshapes everything that you do.
وبتتعلم كل هذا من غير الستريس إنه أنت on your own as an attending. You act like an attending without the pressure and stress of responsibility, like full responsibility.
Yeah, the transition to care. Okay, so the first question we have, in Salih al-Suradi, I want to ask about the CV we have. I'm a green card holder and I just have orthopedic residency and steps. I apologize if I don't understand the question. In this rare instance, Salih, if you're with us, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
يعطيكم العافية أول شيء ويمسيكم بالخير وكل الشكر يعني على هاللقاء الجميل لكم يعني دائما أنتم بتساعدونا وبترفعوا معنويات. سيدي العزيز سمبل كويستشن بس أنا لأنه بالعمليات فكنت معجوب شوي. السؤال كالتالي أنا ما عندي أي publish. I just يعني have finished the steps and معي 5th year orthopedic residency. أنا السنة الخامسة يعني. I'm planning to apply for the fellowship match next year يعني. فأم afraid إنه أنا ما عندي publish وما عندي يعني US clinical experience ولا elective ولا observership ف يعني بس هذا هو السؤال يعني I just go to match يعني with the steps residency green card.
So what I can tell you, and anyone who has a different opinion, feel free to step in. First of all, before I forget, we actually have a session. Our next 2 sessions are going to focus on other surgical specialties. So we have a session coming up which will include some orthopedic surgeons, and they'll be specifically talking about fellowship applications. That being said, the fact that you're a green card holder will help you out a lot. The fact that you already have your steps and you've done orthopedics, the match rate for fellowships in orthopedics is a little bit more forgiving than in general surgery. What I would do is there's actually, I know the match system has its own CV format, but also there is something called the Harvard Academic CV format. You can search it on Google. And it gives you the opportunity to really highlight everything you've done. You gave a lecture to medical students a year ago. There's a place where you can put that on there. You will need to highlight your CV in other ways since you don't have research. That would be in showing how you're into teaching. Any initiatives you've taken. Did you come up with a master rota, for example? Did you host a seminar, a webinar? Research is important, but the fact that you don't have it, I would not say you should just give up. Fill out your CV in other ways and apply. You never know what might happen.
شكرا دكتور رسول كثير يعني شكرا لك كثير بس أنا بدي كمان ما بدي أخذ من وقت كثير بدي نقطة أحكي عنها اللي هي السيمينار والويبنار يعني إحنا في عنا لجنة علمية بالمدينة الطبية لدائرة جراحة العظام فإحنا في كل تقريبا أسبوع في عنا 2 to 3 lectures في orthopedic يعني to discuss the cases فكيف مثلا هل ممكن لأنه سمعت أحد الزملاء يعني كان بيحكي إنه كان عنده فيديوز لlectures كان بيعطيهم بقطر هل ممكن إنه can we use it يعني as a CV?
Now, what Abutaka was referring to is the American College of Surgeons, the Clinical Congress. They host an annual event during which you can actually bring in, just like an abstract, instead of research, it's an operation, very specific operation. You go up, it's a 5-minute podium presentation, and you present the operation and what you did and why you did it that way. What you're referring to sounds more like continued education. If you present any of those lectures, there is a place on the CV where you can put it. You could put, weekly 1-hour lecture to medical students, bi-monthly 1-hour hands-on basic suturing course for medical students. And you find different ways of building up your CV to cover other deficiencies.
شكرا كثير دكتور شكرا دكتور شكرا لك.
عفواً حبيبنا. All right. The next question. Let's see. I think my thing may have jumped over a question, or some people responded to questions, so it kind of jumped. So the question is, would this pathway, I think they were talking about Amjad Qabbani's pathway, allow you to become eligible to sit the boards after a certain period of time? Or is it unnecessary that you have the state's medical license, knowing that you want to stay at that institution? Sorry, I'm just going to mute someone real fast here. All right. So again, anyone feel free to interrupt me and take over, so I'm not just rambling by myself. But the important distinction is you have two things here, right? So you have the American Board of Surgery and its whole pathway. And there are different ways to get that. And then you have the license and a different pathway for all of that. They are not interchangeable. So if you're not eligible for a license, doesn't mean you're not eligible for the board, and vice versa. The reason for that, and I'll just keep this real brief, is you did 2 years of residency as an IMG. You are not licensable in states that require 3 years. But per the ABS, because they gave you credit, you can take the board. Or you did an intern year, second year, third year, but never finished your last 2 years, you're licensable. You can get a full license, but not the American board. So they're very different and they don't intermingle. In Dr. Qabbani's pathway, there is a route where you can go to work at a hospital for 7 years. The hospital has to be affiliated with an ACGME residency and a medical school. And after completing 7 years at that institute, you are now board eligible. You'll still be on probably an institutional license if you do that somewhere besides New York. But yeah, so there is a route through Qabbani's way of being able to do that. I hope that answers your question, Ahmed. The next one is Dr. Abid. Sorry, I just realized you're here. Abid Al-Jabir. So the question was about all these different things, and it seems like it's been mentioned that this is mostly for general surgery, and that is accurate. Different boards have different pathways. For example, in orthopedics, if you do 3 years of fellowship, you're board eligible. If you do 5 years with an institutional license, you're board eligible. I think ENT has something similar, and we'll kind of talk about those. But this is specifically more for general surgery, which tends to be the most punishing when it comes to the licenses and board eligibility. Other programs are a little bit easier. All right. Dr. Hala has a question. I just finished my general surgery residency in Jordan, passed step 1 and working on the rest. My plan is to get a fellowship in plastic surgery in the States and maybe pave my way to stay there and work. She's done a month of plastics in Harvard, and she's knowing any experience you know of someone getting in this field, especially though it's very competitive. I actually know of some people, but I want to see if anyone else wants to take a minute while I drink something.
اشوف هذول بس شوية اوكي.
I know someone who like he was like in Hamad. He finished plastic surgery residency, and he came for like a fellowship at St. Louis University. Now he's like being safe, Bedran. So yeah, he's being offered now O visa, and he's gonna work as an attending, obviously. You know about him, you can go ahead. So yeah, it's like it's even for those competitive specialty, there's opportunity, but again, you need some research, you need to be like distinguished.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, Saif was definitely the person that I also had coming to mind. But again, same thing. You know, similar to Dr. Qabbani, came to the States, did 1 year of fellowship, stood out, you know, put their best foot forward. Now they're being recruited. So yes, 100%, there is a chance you have a month of plastics in Harvard, getting a letter of recommendation from them is a great idea. And I know of many people who've actually done plastics fellowship from gen surg or from plastic surgery. They are non-ACGME accredited. That's the important distinction. Because to get into an ACGME accredited fellowship, 99% of the time, and I say that 99 because there are exceptions always, you have to be board eligible. That's just the way it is. But even if it's a non-ACGME accredited fellowship, it's perfectly fine. Dr. Ashraf said, all transplant fellowship, non-ACGME accredited, bariatric, foregut, hepatobiliary, surgical critical, no, sorry, I'm going to take that last one back. The majority of these are non-ACGME accredited. Doesn't mean they're not real fellowships. They're accredited by the Fellowship Council, but that's just how it is.
I can just add something actually. So you can be like, it can be accredited by the society also. So it's like accredited by a society. It's recognized as well for that path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, you can apply for burn and critical care and plastics. It really helps. Get you connected, get you experience, getting US experience, as well as you're still doing burn, which is reconstructed plastic.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. You don't necessarily need to jump in straight into plastics. Yes, and that's actually a great idea. You can step into a burn fellowship. They tend to go unfulfilled each year. And you can match in some great places like Hopkins. And you do a year of burn, make the connections, jump into the field you need. Next question. When you say teaching, what kind of teaching do you mean you can add to your CV? I feel like I touched on this a little bit before, but if anyone else wants to kind of add to that.
Yeah, actually anything. Teaching is, there are two types, or you can put it in your CV in two ways or more. First, you can put student teaching, if you have medical students rounding with you, or you're giving lectures to medical students. You can put that you're giving students, for example, a review on gallbladder diseases quarterly. Every time they rotate with you, you give them that lecture, for example. You put that in your CV. And then if you're giving peer teaching or peer education for your residents, as Dr. Saleh was saying before, they have a weekly seminar, webinar. So if you're giving a lecture in that, just put that in your peer education that you give this and this lecture. If you have an invited, if you were invited to the presentation in a local symposium, for example, you put that under invited presentations. So basically, if you give, for example, a review session for board exam before the boards for either residents, your peers, when you finished residency and you're starting an attending job in Jordan or anywhere, and you're giving the residents board review sessions, you put that in. So basically, that's pretty much teaching. It should not be huge, especially when you're a resident, but there should be something, to be honest, and all of you will have something. Just it's a matter of how you arrange it, how you put it there.
I agree. I again want to apologize. I am not the best when it comes to technology, but I'm going to pull up my CV here. Let me see if I can find a way to share my screen. Share. Can people see this?
Yes, it's working.
Yeah. So over here, reports of local teaching and training courses, right? So the years I was in Hamad, very simple, names of 2 lectures that I did, and 2-hour lecture quarterly. You scroll down, you see BI, surgical skills session, 1-hour session, dry lab. Scroll down more, you see, the Da Vinci robot, bariatric journal club, FLS and FES training, Very simple, PGY 1 through 3, Allegheny Health Network, 1 hour weekly. Bedside teaching, this is just rounds. It's daily rounds where you go on an educational round, bedside clinic OR teaching, because as a surgeon, you take people through it. And, 20 hours for medical students, interns, residents. There's a place for it all. Then you have, of course, local invited presentations, formal teaching of peers. So there's a place that you can find. That was the Harvard CV format, and highly recommended. You can find a place for everything in there. Next, Abdul Jabir said, license plus board and license without board. Is the difference only in the malpractice, or are there other differences? From my knowledge, the malpractice actually doesn't really change that much. At least the insurer we worked with in Pennsylvania, Palladium, there was no real difference because they saw that you were licensed and that was all that really mattered. However, the hospital's board, when they privilege you for your procedures, if they see that you're not board eligible or board certified, so BE/BC, they may tone back on what procedures you're eligible for, because the way they see it is these higher risk procedures, if something were to go wrong, then they might actually be slammed for saying, oh, you hired someone who's not board eligible. That's really the only difference I see, just kind of in job applications and privileging. Anyone else with other opinion on that?
Yeah, I agree. There's no difference actually, like in malpractice, whether you're like board eligible or not. Yeah. At least so far, from what I know, maybe.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I haven't seen anything either. Rene made a very good point. Stop counting years if you want to be a surgeon. That's true. I mean, here in the US, between 3rd year and 4th year, people go out for 4 or 5 years of research. They get their PhD. So yeah, every case counts, 100% accurate. There's something called the fallacy of the beard, which is if, I have a head full of hair and I just keep plucking a piece of hair, I'll never go bald, which is false. Eventually you will go bald. And just like that, every case is important. Every year is important. All right.
محمد لو تسمح لي بس هيك نص دقيقة أحكي مداخلة صغيرة بعد إذنك.
لا أكيد. You wanted to mention about your licensing experience, correct?
Yes.
تفضل. Go ahead. I'll take a break.
يعني ما آسف أنني قطعت وهيك دخلت يعني اقتحمت الموضوع بس في كلمتين والله بدي أحكيهم عن موضوع اللايسنس يعني لأن أنا شوي تغلبت فيهم. ان شاء الله على موضوع الاي ان تي وهي الاشياء بنحكيها بوقت ثاني بالتفصيل الاكثر. بس انا اسمي احمد ابو سعود، انا اي ان تي اتندنج بسينت لوكس هيلث نتورك واسيستنت بروف بتمبل بيو بن، وان شاء الله يعني at the end of this month I'll celebrate my 2nd year anniversary for being attending. هلا بالنسبه لموضوع اللايسنس الميديكال لايسنس، حكيتوا كثير انتم على موضوع الفيزا. موضوع الفيزا كثير مهم. حكيتوا على موضوع الميديكال بورد والاليجيبيليتي وكل هاي الاشياء. موضوع اللايسنس تحديدا كثير تريكي واحيانا بيكون كثير سهل. هلا بتعرفوا احنا عندنا ثقافه بالاردن كلتشر انه مشي لنا اياها يا زلمه. بتعرفوها هاي لما تروح على محل يعني مثلا تقدم على باسبورت وتكون صورتك عمرها 7 سنين مش 6 شهور، بتقول له هاي الصوره، بتقول لك لا، بتقول له مشي لنا اياها يا زلمه. فانا يعني مره قدمت على باسبورت صوره اعطيته عمرها 10 سنين، كان عندي شعر، حط لي اياها، صار يضحك الشرطي في امريكا، بيقول لي مين هذا يعني. فثقافه مشي لي اياها هاي بتمشي كثير في الميديكال بورد في امريكا. امريكا فيها 50 ستيتس، كل ولايه لها ميديكال بورد. لو تروح على الويب سايت كاي ام جي وتقرا على الكرايتيريا تبعت اللايسنس، انا بحكي على الفول انريستريكتد لايسنس، على الاغلب معظم الناس اللي زي حالاتنا اللي بيجوا بيعملوا fellowships especially if it's unaccredited fellowship, they are not meeting the criteria, they are not eligible for the license. However, I managed to get 5 license على 2 years unaccredited fellowship, وانا I applied for more. I think I applied for 8 and 9 بس بالاخر زهقت وما كملتش و I got a job, so that's why I did not يعني submit all the papers for Texas مثلا for Missouri وهي الاشياء. For example، ومش راح اطول كثير عصام بابا بليز. ماريلاند مثلا، انا عملت هناك الفيلوشيب تبعتي. هناك they ask for 2 years accredited training عشان تاخذ اللايسنس. And I applied, I submitted my papers. قالوا لي you're not meeting the criteria. However, في عندنا كوميتي بتجتمع كل شهرين وبعثوا لي ليست من الاشياء اللي لازم اقدمها، زي انه مثلا الانستتيوشن تبعتك GCI accredited، هاي طبعتها من الانترنت يعني شيكت، يعني طلبوا مني سيلبس، طلبوا مني مش عارف كيس لوج، كله هذا عملته بيومين وخليت البروجرام دايركتور تبعي يوقع عليها، واعطيت كوبي لكل الناس اللي اجوا بعدي على الفيلوشيب هاي عشان يستعملوها لما بده يقدموا على اللايسنس. And it worked and I got my full license. Pennsylvania they asked for 3 years, now they ask for 2. and accredited، بيطلبوا accredited، انا ما كان عندي accredited، كان عندي 2 years. تفضل.
لا, I just want to say, when did you apply for Pennsylvania?
3 years ago تقريبا.
They changed it recently, but you're fairly on point. Pennsylvania is very easy, although they make it seem very hard.
Yeah, if you go read the website you're not meeting the criteria. فكل الناس شو اللي بتسويه، بتروح بتقرا بتقول لك انا IMG I'm not eligible I'm not meeting the criteria وخلص they gave up وما بيعمل. لا، ثقافه مشينا اياها هاي تبعت الاردن it works very well هون في امريكا في موضوع اللايسنس تحديدا. انا قدمت، طلبوا مني 2 recommendation letters من American attending 15. بتعرف احنا ابو العرب بنحب الورق الزياده. و I got my license. In New Jersey is the same. بعرف شو طلبوا بس قدمت واخذت اللايسنس، يعني مش متذكر. نفس الشيء بويسكونسن. يعني طلعت اللايسنس على التليفون literally، يعني بعثت الورق قلت له اذا وين تاخرتوا علينا، قال لي يلا شو كذا، بعث لي هالورق، بعثت له اياها ايميل، بعث لي اللايسنس على الايميل رايت اواي. فهلا في ولايات طبعا بيكونوا نكدين وبيعرفوك حالك وبيطلبوا 100 ورقه وبيعطوك restricted license والى اخره. بس what I'm trying to say، وهي يعني النقطه اللي I want to stress، اللي هي انه لا، مش اللي بتقرأه على الويب سايت هو اللي صح، مش انه والله if you applied if you read on the website that بتحس انه انت مش eligible ومش meeting the criteria to give up. No, قدم وfight throw your paper if they are planning not to give you the license.
No, 100%. Pennsylvania, funny enough, you should mention that. So Pennsylvania, they ask for, on their website, PGY 1, 2, and 3. فأنا when I applied, I didn't have 1, 2, and 3. I had 4, 5, and then I had a fellowship. فراسلت لهم and I was like, you know, you say 1, 2, 3, and anyway you can do an exception. They're like, yeah, just get us a letter that you have a job offer and a letter from the chair of surgery. And that was it. I got one letter, I sent it. I was like, anything else? Nope, nothing. And I had my license in 3 weeks. So 100% everything is much more manageable. But the important point to distinguish here is that Ahmed was in the States before. So it's easier. So you need to have your foot here. You need to have something from the US. Just kind of coming from overseas and saying, hey, I'm coming from overseas, بتقدم أوراقك and see if you get the license, probably might not be as successful, but some form of training in the US is important. ولا شو رأيك أحمد؟
I totally agree with you. يعني موضوع license is really very flexible. Don't listen to them or apply. I know people applied for New York license and they got full unrestricted license and they have 0 US experience. I know other people that applied for Florida license and they had 0 experience at the time when they applied. They give them license, but they ask them only to do 6 months in accredited program under supervision. يعني one condition very easy. يعني إذا بتحصل أي fellowship ممكن تحصلها. But they asked him to come in person and they interviewed him. هدول تبعون فلوريدا. What I'm trying to say إنه كل واحد different. أنا يعني my advice يعني لأي حدا looking for applying for license trying to find a job إنه دور لك على ولاية very easy like Wisconsin. They don't ask for accredited training. They will give you like the license even before that you finish your 2nd year. Or it costs you only $75, not expensive like Texas, $1,000 Maryland.
Nevada.
Apply for the more difficult license.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, there are a lot of easier licenses to get. Abdurrahman Jabir is also agreeing. Yeah, I mean, you can get all these different licenses, no problem. And we can come to a point to summarize this. And that's why when this Tennessee law, I'm sure everyone saw the post, Tennessee opens up this law, everyone was going crazy over it. It was nothing new. that has been around for ages, and in a lot of states, a lot easier as well. We can do a quick summary kind of everything in a bit, but we have one more question I see from Dr. Noor Hashim. She says, I'm about to start residency in Egypt. I am on my way to finishing the steps, willing to do fellowship in the US. If we have any advice for what she should do during her residency to be prepared to go to the States. Would anyone like to jump on board this question? Qabani, Yazan.
I don't have experience in this pathway, but I think kind of the general things is similar with all of them, which is if you can do an elective in the States at some point. I don't know if the residency allows for that. That definitely helps to have a letter from US. And then if you do a good job at that institution, maybe it's the same institution that takes you for fellowship. And then the other thing is publications and research. And you don't need USMLEs, do you, for the fellowships? That's something I forgot to ask.
You do. You need step 3.
You do.
Step 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I missed the question. So I was on phone call. Was it like about? Do you need like?
Yeah, it was.
letters,
It's
or?
asking. You know, you're about to start residency in Egypt, Qatar, Jordan. What can you do to get yourself ready to eventually apply to fellowship in the States?
Yeah, sure. So we touched base about like education. So that's a big thing to do. So teach medical students, teach your junior residents, and try to go if your program director can allow you to go for 1 or 2 months to the States, go do some electives, reach out to people, attend seminars and society meetings in the States. I mean, you come here for 1 or 2 months. It's a great experience. Whether it's going to help you or not, you get exposed to the system. You might like it, you might not. I mean, before you jump into a fellowship, make sure that you want to come here. So it's always a good idea to come for 1 or 2 months before you start planning. The other thing, always like if you're starting residency, always keep good relations with people. It's part of the professionalism of our career, obviously. Like just imagine, and now as I'm applying for the license, they asked a contact for my internship, which was like 12 years back. So yeah, people, they verify stuff, they ask about people. And if you don't have like sometimes like good relations with people in your residency, you might get backstabbed. And I know a lot of people who got into trouble with that. So this is something just to consider also. Just like be professional, have good relations with everybody. During your residency, you will meet people eventually. Research is a very important thing. So I would like to do like flavor or flower from each aspect, I would say. Some research, a bit of education, come to the States if you have the opportunity for an exchange. Yeah.
No, I think that's all important. And you actually touched on an important thing. And I think you know where I'm going to go with this. About you never know who you know and who you meet, especially during internship. As an intern, on my first month of being, an intern, I walked into an OR where a bariatric surgeon by the name of Billy Hillmith was operating. And, I walked in, here are the patients, talking to the doctors and everything. Billy Hillmith became the person 5 years later who wrote my letter of recommendation that helped me get my job in Boston. So he wrote me my letter of recommendation. And then when I went for my interview, Dan Jones, the program director there, was like, oh, Hillmith sings your praises. He says 1, 2, 3. And if he says that about you, you're good in my books. And that was from my intern year. So you never know when something is going to come back to help you. So yeah, our pleasure. All right. Final thoughts before I do my best to kind of recap all of these pathways. Okay. So in talking about the pathways, we have specifically years credit for years served and fellowship pathway. If you've done anywhere from 1 to 4 years of residency training overseas, you're eligible to get 1 year of credit. If you've done 5 years and you're board certified, you can get 2 years of credit. The good news is these are at program director discretion. So the program director from the program you're going to can waive these for you. So he can accept you, no problem. For 3 years of credit, the requirement is a full residency, board certification, 6 months of being observed. Those 6 months of being observed can either be in the form of a PGY3, 6 months, or as part of your fellowship. For example, myself, I popped in to a new hospital after my fellowship somewhere else. I was technically under observation for 6 months, and then they approved me through the American board, did another 6 months, then 1 year. Those were my 2 years. Dr. Abutaka, as part of his fellowship, those 6 months of being observed were fulfilled. And that's kind of how you get your years for credit served, credit for years served, sorry. The other option is obviously, and this is more and more the more popular option, is that you pop into a fellowship. The most common fellowships are transplant and critical care. You arrive for the year and you do one of two things. You either do the fellowship and then go on to find a job as an attending, or you do the fellowship, then you pop back in as a resident. Just like we have Dr. Yazin Al-Adwan, who did his fellowship followed by super fellowship and on to attendingship. There's another doctor I heard of, Ismo Mundir El-Titi, if I'm not mistaken, who did transplant fellowship, then popped back in as a resident. We also have Abutaka and Amjad, who are, one went into attendingship, one went back into residency. And that seems to be a popular option because you get that fellowship training. So it's not really like you're going back as an intern, and then you build the relationships and you take it from one of two paths from there. The considerations are licensing and the American board. Some specialties, you want the American board. It just helps you out in job hunting. Some jobs, it doesn't really add to it. The ways to get the American board, at least in general surgery, are either getting credit for years served or just redoing the full residency. There's no in between. And the other one is the one Amjad showed us, which I believe is the pathway he's actually working on. So he may be, while a lot of us Jordanians have gotten credit for years served, I think Amjad might be the first one who's actually doing this pathway. So we'll have a lot to learn from him. But you go to a place with a residency, with a medical school affiliation, 7 years, you get the American board, which is great because the American board opens up your options, especially as someone who's maybe not transplant surgery, someone who's gen surge, bariatric, etc., where they'll look at you and say, why should we take you and not someone who's board certified? Because they have a complement of people who are board certified. And also when coming back to Jordan or Dul Khalij or wherever you may end up. So that's very valuable option right there. And then we come to licensing. Dr. Ahmed made a very good point, and Dr. Abdurrahman Jabir was also agreeing, and I agree. But there's an important point to distinguish here is that their fields are urology and ENT. And in Gen Surge, they tend to make it a little bit more complicated for us, just a little bit in some states, not everywhere. But generally speaking, the way you're going to get your license is either through an ACGME accredited pathway, either 2 or 3 years of fellowship, depending on the state, or 2 or 3 years of ACGME residency. There are some states which will give you a 2-for-1 exchange rate for ACGME-I accredited years. Some states will actually waive it for you. And then you get to the big option of an institutional license. And when you come to an institutional license, it's essentially working as an associate professor of surgery in a hospital that has a medical school affiliation. So for example, Drexel and Temple, they assign you as an associate professor of surgery in Drexel University. So you are now have an unrestricted license to practice surgery at Allegheny General Hospital, which is affiliated with Drexel, and that is renewed yearly. You are owned by them for the whole year. And at the end of the year, they say, all right, renew again. And at any point, they can say, no, thank you. And because they know you're on a restricted faculty, institutional, licensed by endorsement, whatever you want to call it, it's available in every state. They will probably cut your pay, treat you not great. At least this is the experience I've heard from many people on these licenses. And it's renewed yearly. But at the end of 5 years, you can apply for an unrestricted state license. Once you have that, you can practice in the whole state free. And then about 9 to 11 states will give you a license through reciprocity, where they essentially say, you're licensed here, so we will give you a full license. Nothing is as it seems on the internet. Whatever they say online, where they say you're not eligible, probably not true. But this is the general frame that is available in every single one of the 50 states. And then some states have some exceptions. I don't know, Qabani, Yazan, if you guys have anything you want to add to that I may have missed.
Nothing much to add, actually, Rasuls. Thank you, Colin.
So with that, we can conclude this. I will say, the number has dwindled down. We're at 23 now. So if anyone would like to unmute, ask a question, I kicked my family out of the house until 9 o'clock. So if anyone would like to take some time to ask us some questions or anything, I'm more than happy to hang back and answer them.
Another question, دكتور محمد. أنا صالح بعتذر كثير اليوم أزعجكم.
لا حبيبنا لا ازعج ولا اي شيء بالعكس نحن بالخدمه.
حبيبي, did they count the experience after like finishing a residency as an like CV? يعني إشي point بالCV قوية?
Yes. As long as you show ongoing experience, they loved it. The biggest thing is in the States, they have what they call remediation. So if you're out of practice for more than, and it depends on the state and the institute, but in general, anywhere from 4 months to 11 months, then you need remedial services, they call. انك انت خارج التريننج خارج الممارسة, you need to be observed. But besides that, anything that shows that you're ongoing, you're working, you're training, you're practicing is fantastic. Like I said, in between my initial residency and my bariatric fellowship, I was doing acute care surgery with a colorectal mentorship. And again, I'm using the word mentorship because it wasn't a structured learning opportunity. But when I applied and I went and they were like, well, what have you done? I was like, I've done this. Here's my logbook for the year. They're like, perfect. So you're still working. So anything helps.
Okay, another question, sir, if you allow me. يعني المكان اللي أنت عامل فيه residency, like if you're doing your residency in center or in periphery, like أنت بتعرف إنه بالعرض مثلا المدينة تعتبر توما سنتر.
معلش الخط قطع, تقدر تعيد؟
يس اوكي. بحكي انه المكان اللي انت عامل فيه الريزيدنسي تبعك مثلا, احنا مثلا بتعرف انت بعمان مثلا تعتبر المدينه as trauma surgery or an orthopedic surgery for orthopedic, like it's a level 1 trauma center.
صح.
هل مثلا بيحسبوا انه انت مثلا عامل كل الريزيدنسي تبعتك مثلا بسنتر بليفل 1 تروما سنتر وانت مثلا ما رحت مستشفيات بريفري, عكس مثلا حدا عامل الريزيدنسي تبعه بريفري هوسبيتال؟ يعني بيفرق هذا الحكي بالسي في ولا بالنسبه لهم كل الاوفرسيز لايك ريزيدنس او الاي ام جيز it's the same يعني؟
Yeah, so they don't know. That's the truth of it. They don't know what your hospital is or what training you've got. So it's on you to highlight that. And that's where your personal statement comes into play. You say, I worked here. This is a level 1 trauma center, the hub for all of trauma in Jordan. وبتكبرها وبتوضحها وبتخليها واضح انه ما في تروما بكل الاردن بسكان ال10 مليون غير بصفي هون بين ايدينا. And you make it clear what your experience is. بس هم منهم عليهم they probably won't know. The best they'll be able to tell is that, sorry, I'm going to mute someone. The best they'll be able to tell, and the one thing that they'll probably know is that in Medina Tabiya, this is a military hospital, so you've probably gotten good training. And that's probably the only piece they'll be able to say is that had من الجيش تدريبه مميز, الwork ethic مميز. Beyond that, they probably don't know anything about the program.
Okay, thank you, sir. شكرا دكتور محمد.
Hello, Dr. Mohammed.
أهلا مرحبا.
It's Hal Bataina. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. So I've already asked you about pursuing a career in plastic surgery in the States. The problem is actually I have no idea where should I start looking for positions, or should I just apply for the match of fellowships, or what should I do?
All right. So I'm not going to lie. Truthfully, when it comes specifically to plastic surgery, aside from the ACHME, which I think you'd be better serviced applying to non-ACHME accredited fellowships, just because that's the general rule. Because we're not board eligible or board certified. There's definitely going to be a portal where you can find all of these fellowships. I don't know which one or where the portal is. Yeah.
Is there APDS? Don't they put certain fellowships on APDS?
So I was going to say, so APDS, you'll find the burn fellowships on there. I don't think you'll find beyond burn. I don't know. Will you find plastic surgery on?
I have no idea. I remember sometimes seeing fellowships, but most of the times it was for residency positions. But I don't know if there's like an APDS just for fellowships or, you know, an equivalent website. And there was even stuff like residency swap.
Yeah.
That gives, you know, that shows you open positions. I'm sure there's one for fellowship. Maybe it's the same ones. Maybe it's residency swap, APDS, those ones.
So I'm pulling it up right now as we speak. Interesting thing about APDS, you know how I said I never applied for the match? So when I was at Harvard doing my bariatric fellowship, they were, you know, the research program where they sent people out for years, and they were like, we'll only know if there's a PGY4 spot a month before we close. I put my email on this website, and that's how I got recruited by AHN, and I ended up going there. And that's why I've never done the match. I'm actually looking at it right now. There are fellowships, there are residencies, and this is the program we always tell people to look at. It's called apds.org, and then you go in under residents and fellows, and you look at open training positions.
Yeah, there's bariatric, there's transplant.
You tend to find them, yeah, because these are places where they need someone now. But like I just found this post for a burn fellow, July 14th. I don't know if there's another.
There's a hand and plastic fellowship in Lincoln.
Yeah, you're right. I see that one right now. Hand and plastic fellowship, non-ACHME at Lincoln Medical Center. There's cardiothoracic. There's a categorical residence. I mean, there's a lot here.
And these change like every few days. There'll be new ones. Like a lot of these were posted, hey, July 25th, July 21st, 19, 11. So it's always changing. So if you're looking for a job, I remember just refreshing the site, 10 times a day,
nonstop. I posted the name of the website here just in case it wasn't clear. In our next two sessions, one of them will or should include plastic surgery. I think we have Dr. Saif Baderne, who's on for that session, and he can definitely talk to his experience and how he found a plastic surgery fellowship and matched into. So that might be something to look out for.
Can I add something? I just found something actually that I was looking for. I knew about it. I didn't know, is it like San Francisco or Los Angeles match? But it's San Francisco. So let me just share my screen.
Okay.
How to do that? Yep. So this is like San Francisco match. So this is pretty much just like the APDS that you mentioned, Rasul. Here you can see some vacancies. You can see my screen, right?
Yeah, we can see it.
So yeah, for example, if you look for, you have like adult cadaveric anesthesia fellowship. This is like anesthesia, aesthetic plastic surgery fellowship, congenital cardiac, dermatology, cosmetic, and facial plastic surgery, for example. Let's go ahead and pursue that.
Oh, nice.
So I think here, like vacancies, you can see some vacancies for you see like post-match vacancy available.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try and pursue that, for example. So yeah, here you have the email. I'll get that. I'll like reach out to those guys.
Yeah.
And offer your CV. So it's like SF match, just like if you like Google San Francisco match unfilled position.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. I mean, this is great. Everyone has different sources for these things. And when I applied, I found my posting on fellowshipcouncil.org, which is the one for bariatric surgery and transplant. And you take the email, you send an email. And when I sent that, I literally did an email dump. I wrote a paragraph. I attached my passport. I attached my logbook, my app site scores. I attached everything so they wouldn't be able to look and say, no, thank you, where they'd look and be like, oh, I'm going to look through this entire application. And they did. And I think that's the proper way to send out these cold emails, just so that you kind of force them to give you the minutes, out of their day. And I've only ever done it had to be successful. But then my end is a 1. So, all right, we have another question. Let me just read this. I'm not sure if it was direct message to me, so I'm going to go silent for a moment.
Can I just add one simple question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, what I was going to ask. See it. Yeah, when should I start applying? After I get my step 3 result, or can I just start applying beforehand?
You can start applying beforehand and just make it well known that, I have the step 3 scheduled for this date, and I'm, going to have it. Ideally, if you already have it, that would be fantastic. But if not, and it's obvious you're going to get it well ahead in advance, that's good. The main thing to remember is, let's say, for example, start date is August 1st. Surgical fellowships tend to start August 1st. You need to have your step 3 well before that, because they're going to need it to apply for your license, whether it's a medical trainee license or a restricted license. So just saying like, oh, you start, August 1st, I'll have it July 25th. They're going to say that's not enough time. They need a few months in advance. But I would definitely apply. We have a question here. I'm just going to mention it's asking about orthopedic fellowships in the US. And there are a number of pathways. I don't want to say orthopedic fellowships are a little more accessible, but I know of definitely more people who have gotten a variety of orthopedic fellowships in the US than other surgical fellowships besides surgical critical care and transplant. So there are definitely a lot more. I unfortunately am not an expert in things outside of Gen Surg, but we do have a session coming up that will include orthopedic surgery. And I know I keep saying we have these sessions coming up, but there's going to be one session that's urology, orthopedics, and ENT. And then we're going to have another session that's plastics, OB-GYN, ENT, or ophthalmology, whichever one was left out. And if there's any popular requests, we'll include those as well. Yeah. All right. Any final questions? Let me see. I hope I didn't miss any questions. All right. Well, if that's everything, thank you all for being here with us today. Hopefully you learned a little something. Maybe we gave you a little hope, inspired you a little bit. The hope and the goal is really that more and more talented Jordanian physicians end up in the US, get that extra little touch, and are able to come back. I always say I'm being a little selfish. I want good, competent surgeons to operate on me because I know I'm getting it very soon. Yeah. والله يعطيكم العافية. تصبحوا على خير.